The arrow hit the fence post 2 inches from Cole's left ear before he even heard the bow sing. He did not move, not because he was brave, because his legs forgot what legs were for. The woman stepped out from the tree line like she had been there all morning, which she had. She walked straight toward him across the dry grass with the kind of calm that made Cole's stomach drop into his boots. She was dressed in a long deerskin dress, dark hair loose in the wind. And she looked at him the way a person looks at something they have already decided about. Cole Whitmore was 26 years old, had never fired his gun at a living thing, could cook decent beans over a fire, and talked to his horse more than he talked to any human being. He was the shyest man in a territory that had no patience for shyness. He worked the land on the eastern edge of the Red Mesa Valley, alone, because alone was the only way he had ever figured out how to live without making a mess of things. The woman stopped 6 feet in front of him. She said, in clean and careful English, "I want a child from you." Cole's hat blew off his head. He did not chase it. Her name was Naira. She was 24 years old, daughter of Running Elk, who was one of the last chiefs still holding a piece of the Mesa Valley against the slow push of settlers and cattle companies. Naira had watched Cole Whitmore from a distance for 3 months. She had watched him let a lame coyote eat from his scraps instead of shooting it. She had watched him sit in the rain rather than pull up the bean seedlings he had planted and bring them inside because he did not want to disturb their roots. She had watched him have a full conversation with a rock he had been digging up, apparently apologizing to it. She had made her decision. Cole stood very still and looked at a point somewhere past her left shoulder. "Ma'am," he said. His voice came out smaller than intended. "My name is Naira," she said. "I know your name. Cole Whitmore. You have farmed this land for 2 years, and you have not stolen water from the East Creek, which every other settler does. You have not shot at our scouts. You mended the fence on the North Ridge that our horses keep breaking through, even though it costs you work." Cole finally looked at her face. That was a mistake, in the way that looking directly at the sun is a mistake. Not because it hurts, but because after, everything else looks dim. "I need a child," Naira continued. "My people need a child who carries blood from both sides of this valley. There is a man in the cattle company, Harlan Dodd, who wants this land. He will not take it while my father lives. But my father is sick. When he dies, there will be no one left to hold the treaty. Unless I have a son or daughter who can stand between your people and mine. A child who belongs to both. A child that even Harlan Dodd cannot call an outsider." Cole picked up his hat from the dirt, turned it in his hands. "You want to marry me?" he said. It was not quite a question. "I want a child," she said again. "Marriage is a word your people use. What I am asking is older than that word." Somewhere in the distance, a hawk made a sound that carried across the whole empty valley. Cole said, "I need to think." Naira nodded once. "I will come back in 3 days. If your answer is no, I will not come back again, and we will not speak of this." She turned and walked back toward the tree line without hurrying. Cole stood in his field holding his hat until she disappeared. Then he sat down in the dirt right where he was, between 2 rows of corn that were not doing well. And he stared at the mountains until the light changed. He thought about a lot of things. He thought about his mother back in Ohio, who had died when he was 9, and how he had not spoken to his father after that in any way that meant something. He thought about how he had come west because west was the direction where a man who did not know how to be around people could still find enough space to breathe. He thought about Harlan Dodd, who he had seen once at the trading post in Ridge Creek, A big square man with small flat eyes and hands that never seemed to stop moving, like they were always looking for something to take hold of. He thought about the arrow in the fence post. He thought about the way Naira had said his name, like she had been practicing it, like it mattered enough to practice. 3 crows landed in the field and started walking around like they owned it. "Don't start," Cole told them. He went inside and made coffee, and did not sleep much that night. The next morning, he rode into Ridge Creek to ask a few quiet questions, and what he learned did not make him feel better. Running Elk had been sick since spring. Harlan Dodd had filed papers with the land office in Tucson, claiming a stretch of Mesa Valley that included both Cole's acreage and the Apache camp. The land agent in Ridge Creek, a nervous little man named Pete Calloway, had told 2 different people that Dodd had friends in Tucson who would make the papers stick. Cole rode back home slower than he had ridden out. He fed his horse. He checked on the coyote, which had been sleeping under the porch for a week now. He stood at the fence and looked east toward the tree line for a long time. On the second day, a boy from Naira's camp appeared at the edge of his property and left a folded piece of deerskin on the fence post. Inside it was a small drawing in charcoal, a map of the valley, with a mark where the East Creek split, and what looked like 2 figures standing on either side of the water. Cole looked at it for a while. Then he put it in his shirt pocket. On the morning of the 3rd day, he was already standing in the field when Naira came out of the trees, and she stopped at the same distance as before. He said, "I have a condition." She waited. "We do this right," he said. "Whatever your people call right, and whatever mine call right, and whatever comes of it, the child knows both. Not half of one and half of the other, all of both." Naira looked at him for a long moment. "That," she said, "is exactly what I intended." Cole nodded, looked at his boots, looked back up. "All right then," he said. The hawk was back, circling high over the valley in a slow, wide loop, and neither of them looked at it, but both of them heard it, and that was enough. Naira came to his land the following week with 2 women from her camp, both older, both watching Cole the way you watch a horse you have not decided whether to trust yet. They walked his property from one edge to the other without asking permission, checking the soil, the water line, the way the corn rows ran, the lean of the fence. Cole followed at a respectful distance and did not say anything, which seemed to be the right call. One of the older women, who Naira called Aunt Birdwing, though Cole could not be certain that was a translation or an actual name, crouched at the edge of the east field for a long time, with her hand flat on the ground. Then she stood and said something in Apache that Cole did not understand, and Naira's expression did something complicated that he also did not understand. "She says the land is tired," Naira told him, "but not dead. She says you have been farming it like you are asking it a favor instead of taking from it. She says that is unusual for your kind of man." Cole looked at Aunt Birdwing. "That is the nicest thing anyone has said to me in 4 years, he said. Aunt Birdwing looked at him like he had just said something either very stupid or very endearing, and she walked away before he could figure out which. The formal agreement between Cole and Naira happened 3 days later, in a clearing half a mile into the Apache land, where Running Elk sat under a cedar tree wrapped in blankets despite the heat, his breathing slow and his eyes sharp. He looked at Cole for a long time without speaking. Cole stood straight and tried to look like the kind of man worth looking at. Running Elk said something. Our Naira translated, "He says you have the eyes of a man who has been frightened by something and has not yet decided whether to keep being frightened or to stop." Cole said, "That sounds about right, sir." Something shifted in Running Elk's face. Not quite a smile. Something older than a smile. He spoke again, longer this time. He says, Naira said, that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice made while fear is still present. He says he has watched enough men to know which kind you are. Cole was not entirely sure what kind running elk meant. But the old man held out his hand, and Cole took it, and that was the agreement. The ceremony was quiet. No crowds, no shouting, no gunfire into the air like the cowboys did in Ridge Creek when they celebrated anything. Just cedar smoke and words in two languages, and Cole standing very still in his cleanest shirt, while Naira stood beside him, and the hawks circled overhead, and the valley went about its business below. Cole had expected to feel terrified. He felt something closer to the sensation of setting down a weight he had been carrying so long he had forgotten it was there. What he did not know, what he could not have known on that quiet morning under the cedar smoke, was that 5 miles west in Ridge Creek, Harlan Dodd had received a letter from his man in Tucson. And the letter had told him that his land claim had been approved, pending one final survey, and that the survey team would arrive within the month. And Harlan Dodd had folded that letter into his vest pocket and walked to the window of his hotel room and looked out at the Mesa Valley with the particular expression of a man who has decided something is already his. And 3 days after the ceremony, Cole came home from the east field to find the fence on the north ridge broken again. But this time, not by horses. The posts had been pulled clean out of the ground, and someone had left a single boot print in the mud beside them, too large for any Apache foot. He stood there in the fading light, looking at the broken fence. The coyote came and stood beside him, looking at it too. Yeah, Cole said. He went inside and cleaned his gun for the first time in 2 years. Not because he intended to use it, because the time for assuming he would not have to was over. The survey team rode into the valley on a Tuesday. 4 men with instruments and notebooks, and a 5th man who was not a surveyor. The 5th man was Carl Dodd, Harlan's younger brother, who had the same flat eyes as Harlan, but none of Harlan's patience. Carl had done 2 stints working for the cattle company, driving out homesteaders who had not filed proper papers, and he had a talent for finding reasons why their papers were never quite proper. Cole watched them from the ridge above his land and counted. 4 horses plus Carl's, a wagon with the survey equipment. No guns visible, but that meant nothing. He rode down to meet them on the valley road, which was the polite thing to do, and also gave him the high ground for most of the approach, which was the smart thing to do. Carl Dodd looked at Cole the way a man looks at an inconvenience. "Whitmore," he said, "you are aware that this land has been claimed under the Harlan Dodd Territorial Grant." "I have a deed," Cole said, "filed 2 years ago in the county office in Ridge Creek." "Ridge Creek is a county office," Carl said. "Tucson is the territorial office. My brother's claim supersedes yours under territorial law." "I would want to see that in writing," Cole said. "From the territorial office, not from your brother." Carl smiled with just his teeth. "That can be arranged. In the meantime, I am going to ask you to stand aside and let my men do their work." "In the meantime," Cole said, "I am going to ask you to come back when you have the paperwork." The 2 surveyors in the front of the group looked at each other. They were hired men, not trouble men, and Cole could see them calculating what their daily rate was worth against what this conversation was becoming. Carl Dodd's hand moved toward his hip. From the tree line, without a sound, 4 Apache riders emerged and stopped their horses in a line at the edge of the road. They were not armed in any visible way. They did not need to be. They just sat there, still as the cedars behind them, and looked at Carl Dodd. Naira was not among them. Cole knew she would not be. She was Running Elk's daughter, and Running Elk was holding the treaty, and Naira had told Cole plainly that she could not be seen as the one who lit the fire. even if the fire needed lighting. Carl looked at the riders, looked back at Cole. "This is not over," he said. "I know," Cole said. The survey team turned their wagon around and rode back west, and Cole did not watch them go, because watching a man retreat with your eyes on his back is an invitation. And Cole was not in the business of invitations, he did not mean. He turned his horse and rode to the tree line and stopped beside the nearest Apache rider. A young man named Hawk Foot, who Cole had met twice before, and who spoke enough English to get the important things said. "Thank you," Cole said. Hawk Foot looked at the road where the survey team had been. "They will come back with more men," he said. "Yes," Cole said. "What will you do?" Cole thought about it. "I am going to go home and write a letter to the land commissioner in Tucson, and then I am going to write a letter to the territorial newspaper in Phoenix. And then I am going to ride to every homesteader between here and Ridge Creek and tell them what Harlan Dodd's grant covers, because I am fairly certain it covers their land too, and I am fairly certain they would like to know that." Hawk Foot was quiet for a moment. "That is not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" Cole asked. "A fight." Cole looked at the empty road. "That is what Dodd wants. A fight makes noise. Noise brings soldiers. Soldiers do not come to help people like your family or mine. They come to end noise." He looked at Hawk Foot. "The letter makes noise where Dodd cannot reach it." Hawk Foot turned this over. "Naira chose carefully," he said, and turned his horse back into the trees. Cole rode home and sat at his small wooden table and wrote 3 letters in a hand that was not elegant, but was very clear. And when he finished the last one, the candle had burned down to a stub. And outside, the coyote was barking at something in the dark, then stopped. Then everything was quiet again. He put the letters in his coat pocket, looked at the map Naira had left him, still folded on the shelf above the door where he had put it the morning she first came back. He went to sleep thinking about paperwork, which was not the most interesting thing to fall asleep thinking about, but was considerably more useful than fear. The letter to the Phoenix territorial paper ran 4 weeks later under the headline, "Dodd Cattle Company claims settler lands across Mesa Valley." And the land commissioner in Tucson received Cole's letter and the 7 other letters that arrived the same week from homesteaders who had compared notes and discovered, as Cole had suspected, that Harlan Dodd's grant covered land that 31 families had been farming for between 1 and 5 years. Harlan Dodd was not a man who panicked, but he was a man who recalculated. The recalculation took approximately 10 days, and at the end of it, he sent Carl to Ridge Creek, not with a survey team but with a single message. The message was delivered to Cole by Pete Calloway, the nervous land agent, who arrived at Cole's property on a Thursday afternoon looking like a man who had been asked to carry a live snake somewhere. The message said, "Harlan Dodd would like to speak with Cole Whitmore at the Ridge Creek Hotel at Cole's earliest convenience regarding a mutual arrangement." Cole read it twice, folded it, looked at Pete Calloway. "He wants to make a deal," Cole said. "I believe that is the intention, yes," Pete said. "Tell him Saturday morning," Cole said. "I will be there at 9. Pete rode away faster than he had arrived. Cole went to Naira's camp that evening and told her about the message. They sat outside the cedar post shelter that had become something close to a shared space over the past weeks, the fire between them low and orange, running elk asleep inside. Naira listened without interrupting. "He is afraid," she said when Cole finished. "He is calculating," Cole said, "which is more dangerous." "What do you think he wants?" "I think he wants a piece of paper that makes his grant legal without fighting 31 families and a territorial newspaper story. I think he thinks I can give him that because I have the Apache Alliance and the other homesteaders trust me now." Cole poked the fire. "I think he is going to offer me something. Will you take it?" Cole looked up. Naira was watching him in the way she sometimes watched him, like she was reading a page of something and had gotten to a part she had not expected. "That depends on what it costs everyone else," he said. She was quiet. The fire cracked. Somewhere in the dark, a horse shifted its weight. "Cole," she said, but it was the first time she had said his name without the measured distance she usually kept in her voice. It landed differently. "My father is worse," she said. "The camp healer says before winter." Cole did not say he was sorry, because Naira had made it clear once that she found that particular expression useless. Instead, he said, "Then we need to finish this before winter." She nodded. "Whatever Dodd offers," she said, "make sure the treaty land is untouchable, not just in practice, in writing, with a territorial seal." "I know," Cole said. "And Cole." She paused. "I am going to have a child in the spring." The fire cracked again. Cole sat very still and looked at the flame for a long moment and felt something large and quiet settle in his chest, the way snow settles on a field, changing everything it touches without making any sound at all. "All right," he said. That was all he said. But Naira heard it the way he meant it, which was, "I understand the weight of what you just said. I am not going to drop it." She went back inside. Cole sat by the fire until it went out. Saturday morning, he rode to Ridge Creek with the letters from the 31 families folded in his coat, the territorial newspaper clipping folded on top of them, and a hand-drawn copy of the original treaty boundary that Hawk Foot had given him, which was older than any of Harlan Dodd's paperwork and signed by a general whose name was still on a building in Tucson. Harlan Dodd was sitting in the hotel dining room with two men Cole did not recognize. Lawyers, probably, and a pot of coffee that was already mostly gone. He stood when Cole walked in, which was unexpected. He was exactly as Cole remembered, big and square and still, with those small flat eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Whitmore," Dodd said. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Dodd," Cole said, and sat down. For the next 2 hours, they talked. And Cole did not raise his voice once, and did not touch the coffee, and did not look away from Harlan Dodd's eyes. And at the end of it, there was a paper on the table with terms on it that neither man was entirely pleased with, which meant, Cole had once heard, that it was a fair deal. The treaty land was untouchable, in writing, with the territorial seal to follow within 30 days. Cole's land and the other homesteaders' claims were recognized under the county filing, not the territorial grant. Dodd got water rights to the South Creek below the valley, which he had wanted for his cattle, and which cost the homesteaders nothing and the Apache nothing, because no one had been using the South Creek for anything. It was not a victory. It was an arrangement. But arrangements could hold if the people holding them were paying attention. Cole rode home with the paper in his coat. The valley was gold in the late afternoon light, the mesa casting long shadows east and a line of cedar along the ridge dark against the sky. And it all looked exactly the same as it had looked the morning he arrived 2 years ago, the morning he had thought, "This is far enough." He understood now that far enough had not been the right way to think about it. The right way was, "This is where." He unsaddled his horse, checked on the coyote, who was doing well enough that it had started leaving dead rabbits near the porch as a form of rent. He went inside and put the paper on the shelf next to the deerskin map. In the spring, Naira gave birth to a daughter in the way of her people, with the camp women present and Cole outside keeping the fire going because that was what he had been told to do, and he was a man who respected instructions. When Aunt Birdwing came out and handed him the girl wrapped in a blanket of brown and yellow wool, he was not prepared for it. Which was probably true of every person who had ever held a new child for the first time and felt the full, impossible gravity of a life that had not existed before this moment. The girl had Naira's dark eyes and Cole's ridiculous ears, which he had always considered his worst feature and which on her looked, against all probability, like exactly what her face needed. He carried her inside. Naira was sitting up, tired in the way that goes all the way to the bone, and she looked at Cole holding the girl and said, "What do you want to call her?" Cole had not expected to be asked. He thought about it. "Cedar," he said. Naira looked at him. "For the tree?" she said. "She needs a name that belongs to both sides of this valley," Cole said. "Cedar grows on both sides." Naira was quiet for a moment. Then she said something in Apache, soft, and Cole did not know what it meant, but the sound of it was the sound of something being named and claimed in the oldest possible sense. Harlan Dodd's paperwork cleared the territorial office 6 weeks later, and the treaty boundary was entered into the permanent record. And Carl Dodd never came back to the Mesa Valley, and the survey team went south to bother someone else. Running Elk died in the first week of October, the day after the first frost, sitting upright in his blankets with his face toward the valley. And Naira held his hand through the night before. And in the morning, the whole camp was very quiet for a long time. Cole Whitmore did not become a famous man. He did not get written into any history of the territory. He was not a war hero or a land baron or legend. He was a farmer who kept his fence mended and paid his water debts and talked to his horse, and had once spent 3 hours apologizing to a rock, and who had, by a series of small, deliberate choices made while being genuinely terrified, helped hold a valley together. Cedar grew up speaking 2 languages without accent in either, which annoyed people on both sides and delighted her parents. She learned to ride from Hawk Foot and to read from Cole, and to know the difference between a tired land and a dead one from Aunt Birdwing, who lived to be very old and never once softened her expression when looking at Cole. But on Cedar's 5th birthday pressed both hands to the girl's face for a long moment and said something that Naira later told Cole meant, "You grew exactly as you were supposed to." Cole Whitmore stood at the fence on the North Ridge on a morning in late summer when Cedar was 7 years old. Watching his daughter and his wife ride through the east field in the early light, the valley spread out below them all the way to the mesa, gold and cedar green and full of everything that had been worth being afraid for. He was still the shyest man in the territory. That had not changed, but the land was not tired anymore. Aunt Birdwing had said so, the last time she checked, pressing both hands flat to the earth in the east field and standing up with something that was not quite a smile, but was as close as she had ever come. Cole told the fence post about it. The fence post did not respond, but it held firm, which was the same thing.